Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Coach podcast. Today, we have another amazing guest on the show, and this show is all about uncovering tips and tools from young professionals in their late 20s and their early 30s that can help college students get insights, get experience, get knowledge that can give them guidance along their career journey. I really struggled to get this kind of information when I was in college. I went to Yale, I worked on Wall Street, and now my passion is to help students be successful. And so this show is all about extracting value, extracting insights, and sharing them with you. So grab a pen and paper and take notes, and feel free to get in touch with us afterwards. Enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of the Career Coach podcast. Today we've got Aryan joining us. We met, I think it was about 9 years ago in Cape Town when Aryan did one of the summer programs for our experience. Very excited to have you on the show today to talk about your career and to see how you can share some insights and wisdom with college students that can guide them on their journey.
Happy to help, Aaron. Yeah, I'm excited. I was like, yeah, I somewhere forget that was 9 years ago that we met, and I got to be at iExperience as well. But yeah, fond memories of that summer, of course.
Fantastic. So yeah, maybe a good place to start is to just talk through your background and where you are today. What are you currently doing with your time?
Yeah, I'm currently based out of San Francisco, where I'm a lead product manager at Yelp, working on their home services business. So this is, you can imagine, where plumbers come, where a consumer comes to hire a plumber. But of course, it is something maybe Yelp's not known for as much, but it is one of, a low traffic but very high monetization space for the business.
Okay, interesting. And how did you land up there?
Oh, it was an adventure based on lots of trial and error. And maybe I could jump into that story a little bit. But I had moved to the US to study because I loved the independence that the US provides and letting you explore different things, do different things. And that's how I ended up going to Brown, where I studied computer science and economics. Even though that I had like certainly that's what I wanted to study, based on like stuff I'd experienced in high school as well. Uh, I had like no idea necessarily of what I wanted, what I wanted to do next, and that had taken me on, a full adventure based on trial and error first, because I was like, okay, let me see what I can do in sort of the finance world, which is what had brought me to iExperience as well, because that's the program I did. I finished that summer. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun, but I, then had questions of like, what would like, the tech world necessarily look like? I got a chance then to go to Google the next summer, where I was a software engineering intern. Um, that was a great experience because I got to see, the power of tech and how it scales, which is very different, uh, and also the impact that tech could have. The thing I also realized that summer was that I wasn't necessarily. Uh, there were days where I could basically go into the office and not talk to anyone, and I realized that I was, wanted something that was more social and dynamic. So I was trying to see if that, there was such a role that I could find. Luckily, I did realize that there was, a role called product management, where you sort of get a look at like all of the aspects of the product development journey. That then took me to Microsoft the next summer, where I worked on Windows Server. Windows Server had very different culture compared to Google, uh, but I did get a chance to work, in product management, which was very interesting, and I realized that was, a space that was one that I would like to commit to. And luckily, then Yelp reached out because I think in some ways it matched more of that Google culture, and gave me a chance to be even on a consumer facing product to begin with.
That sounds like a great journey, a very interesting roadmap. What was it like coming from India and sort of moving to the US?
Oh, I mean, of course. I mean, some of the things I definitely remember the first year was I grew up in Mumbai. Mumbai is generally very warm. Coming to Rhode Island, or Providence, Rhode Island, where the first year I was there, there was like 12 feet of snow, and I'd never lived in snow before. Starting from that, like there were just some big changes.
I actually I had the exact same experience coming from South Africa to I've never seen snow before, and I think my first winter I was pretty shocked. I was like, wow, this is actually very cold. And I had to learn to deal with it getting dark at like 3 p.m. And it was quite an adjustment culturally. I think, it's very interesting because we have a lot of international students that do our programs. And for them, moving to the US is quite a big cultural adjustment, and it takes a while to get used to the changes.
Yeah, and I mean, just the changes as well. And, of course, depending on which, first, there's also maybe a lot more competition, when you go to college as well, just generally for everyone involved. So there's sort of like, that academic adjustment. There is a cultural adjustment that you called out. Of course, there's like weather, other things. So it's basically, I feel the first year is sort of like, a bit of a whirlwind where there's just like a bunch of things changing all at the same time and you have no idea what it would be like. And of course, you might also be living away from home for the first time. So there might be like, more emotional things where you might not have the support system set up. And it is a challenge, but I think it is one that you learn, so much from, and maybe at least one that I think I enjoyed because, like, at least for every summer that I spent, I was going to a different place overall. And so it was, definitely something that at least I find interesting and that maybe somewhere like, it started the travel bug in me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you found this, but I found that, when I got to the US, one of my challenges when it came to my career was I didn't really understand like how internships really worked. Because, my family was from South Africa. I'm assuming your family is from India. So, it felt like the American students kind of knew what was going on, and I just didn't really know. And then the second thing was, obviously as international students, there are less opportunities actually because of your visa situation. So
Yeah.
quite overwhelming. Like, how did you deal with that in the early stages of your career? Like, what were your strategies?
No, I think there at least, when as you're right, like first was like, what should I even do to get an internship, right? There are some things that are like unspoken in some ways in basically most of these industries, which is of course, just like a very basic example. Like you should get a referral instead of applying on the website, which is something that's like very like unintuitive when you think about like why is a company putting this up on their website if they don't necessarily want you to go there. Um, and luckily, because I think I didn't necessarily have a background here, I took the other approach of let me just ask for help where I can. And whether that meant going to, the career development center at Brown and just talking to folks there and getting more of their inside tips. I think, maybe, initially it was like a disadvantage not knowing or having that network here. Um, I think taking it as someone who was a complete outsider can be an advantage because then you're actually trying to, follow what the best practices are and not learning something that you shouldn't. Of course, it is disheartening when, like, you hear from a recruiter that, hey, sorry, we can't, go ahead or give you this interview because we don't sponsor visas. That is definitely frustrating. And of course, maybe in some ways, that had also pushed me to being at larger companies as well, because larger companies generally have a higher tendency to sponsor visas and manage that entire process. Um, but that again, depending on how you look at it, it's definitely hard when you go through it. But I think when you look back at it, and if you do find success, I think it can be very rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very mature approach. I mean, I think when I was in college, I started off by not really caring about internships, especially in my freshman summer or sophomore summer. And then when my junior summer came along, I was like, oh no, I really have to get on top of this. So I was a little bit behind when it came to the process.
Yeah, no, you say that, and I'm just like, I mean, maybe I was just someone who was like so confused because it's like, oh my God, should I do finance? Should I do consulting? Should I do software engineering? Should I do something else? But I was like, the only way I can actually answer this question is by trying to at least get, some experience in all of those to have more of that like first-hand experience and make a decision for myself. Um, which is why I was like, okay, cool, like internships, are the way to go. Um, because I don't want to like make a mistake and do something full time that I don't like necessarily enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great piece of advice for a young person is like do as many internships as you actually can. Start early, try different fields, and then see what kind of feels the best, and then you can pursue that. Because I studied engineering, and I ended up actually going into finance and working on Wall Street, which I didn't even know I liked finance until I started doing it. And I just studied engineering because I thought it was what I wanted to do. What was the course that you did in Cape Town, actually?
Oh, I actually did the finance program in Cape
Oh,
Town.
you did the investment finance program, and what did you think of it?
Oh no, I mean, I really enjoyed, meeting everyone there. I actually enjoyed the program as well because like I don't think there was necessarily other courses in school that gave you more like hands-on like financial modeling, expertise. And of course, like I mean, getting deeper into the story, I did actually have a chance to continue in finance even after that summer.
Mm.
But I remember the day where it was like, I think it was the same day where like I heard back from Google about the internship and also heard back from like Citibank about going into investment banking. And I was like, if Google was a couple of days late getting back, I don't know how different my life may have turned out. Uh, but the unknowns are the unknowns. And I won't know the counterfactual, but yeah, did study finance. I've always still been interested in finance, but maybe, later in career, maybe that does come back around because at least much further down the road, maybe I do know product managers also get into venture capital as well. So it is one of the potential future paths, but whether I decide to follow that or not, I'm not completely sure yet at this point.
So, how do you balance sort of your family living overseas and you living in the US? I'm sure that's something that a lot of students have to, or young professionals have to deal with. Like, what is your way of staying in sync and staying connected?
No, and I think of course that's like always a challenge, and I know it's like a deeply personal and emotional challenge as well, and it's also impacted by the circumstances. I think generally I've been very lucky to at least, meet my family at least twice a year, even though, coming up to be in the US for about 9 years. Of course, COVID may have disrupted that a little bit. Uh, but, generally I try to meet them and really try to spend time with them, as like, just a general goal of going back, once or twice a year, or like meeting somewhere, like going back to India once a year, maybe meeting them elsewhere another time of the year. Uh, Also, of course, trying to stay in touch. You know, Maybe if not every day, at least once in every couple of days. Like just talking to my mom, talking to my dad, my sister. I mean, of course, you can't necessarily talk to the dogs back home as much, but it's sometimes good to know that they're being taken care of really well. Um,
I actually spent a summer in India in Mumbai once, and it was crazy. It's a really it's a really busy and wild city. So much traffic and so many people, and so much different types of food. But a really amazing culture. Like, I'd love to go back there at some point.
no, and say, I think yeah, I think that the energy of Mumbai is one that's like hard to come close to, but New York I think is close there, which is why I love also visiting New York in the US a lot. Um, but no, Mumbai is a great place, and I do think as time goes on, I think Mumbai is going to become even better. Of course, the traffic has been an issue, but lots of stuff going on in Mumbai. That's yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's dive into your current job, and I'm sure there's a lot of students that are wondering, like, what is product management actually? So there's a couple of things I'd love to chat about. One is, just you sort of talking about what it is, and then secondly, maybe talking about what does your average day look like as a product manager, like or your week, or do you do Scrum, and just give like a good overall picture of this as a career path.
Yeah. Oh, I'm trying to think of what the best way to summarize this. Is so much to say. Product management is the discipline which defines the who and why we're doing things in a product development cycle. So, trying to define who the users are, why they're important, what business impact that could have. And of course, once you have made that definition, you get a chance to work with, design and engineering to actually build out the product, which is more of the how. And you also get to work on the measurement, which is deciding, are we actually successful with this feature or product that we're building? And how can I actually iterate and go forward from here? One of the interesting challenges in product management is that you don't actually have authority in this entire cycle. So it's like no one is reporting to me, even though I have like a manager in my title. And so it's about how you actually influence people more with, logical sound thinking, and just general arguments versus, with authority. And that is, more a challenge of like, it's more of a soft skill, which, you might, people may have just learned from like other, parts of, or, extracurriculars, but I don't think there's like a class for it necessarily.
Mm.
Um, And what the day to day looks like, I'd actually argue that there is no like necessary like day to day that I could talk about because it's very dependent on what is going on, which part of the life cycle we are in of product development. Like, I mean, I don't necessarily run Scrum at the moment. I'm actually working with like a couple of different teams right now, so I don't get involved as much into, sprint planning or anything along those lines, but I do get more involved into like which projects are we prioritizing over others and why. And maybe at like a more higher level, um, there's like parts of it, right? Which is sometimes you are working on a new product or feature, right?
Mm.
With which, there may be user research interviews going on to actually like really validate, like, is this a real problem users are having? Then, exploring what solutions to those problems can be. That could be, you think your different your wireframing with your design counterpart. You're talking engineering to see what solutions are possible. Then you're putting together a proposal for this, new feature, in which you then try to figure out, okay, how we're going to take it to market as well. So you might be working with marketing and data science also to figure out how you can measure whether you'd be successful, uh, and then actually, of course, launching it, analyzing the results, and continuing. Of course, though, that's an example or one feature, but you're probably working on, even
Mm.
from if you were a new grad product manager, probably working on like a couple features at a given time. And so, of course, it's sort of like balancing of everything going on, context switching, and also making sure you sort of get your head out of the details and also looking at the bigger picture from time to time, especially when maybe you're doing quarterly planning or annual planning as well at your company.
Yeah. No, I remember when I was a product manager, because I also did it for a couple of years. You have to see things from the high level, but you also have to get into the details. You have to be able to speak to the business minded people, but then also to the tech. You have to be good at doing roadmaps, and it's quite a multifaceted role. And I found it to be super interesting. I actually wish it was something that they taught in school as an actual program. We actually used to have a product management program. I think we might actually bring it back. It seems to be in quite high demand at the moment. I mean, I think every tech company needs a product manager, and it really appeals to people who have combination of like visionary skill set, but also like really good at attention to detail, very good communicators. Are able to, like, say, influence without authority, which I quite like as a phrase. So, I mean, if you had to think about the type of person that would be a good fit for a product manager, what do you think their sort of skill set or would be, or their interests?
No, and I think that that's a definitely like, interesting question. And I like I've actually now seen people who have been successful in product management based on just like different things, and you don't actually have to like, check all the boxes all the time as like all your strengths. Um, and of course, right, like let's say that you are someone who's at a very like early stage company, right? Or someone who's really focused on like the 0 to 1 products. You, of course, at that point need someone who can really understand user problems very well and be a great storyteller to paint a picture for how you can do better, right? To just get everyone inspired around you, to really drive to that goal that and to solve the problem that you have put forth. That's, I'd say that's like, in my mind, like one archetype. And of course, people here who have, I'd argue, been successful are people who have just tried doing their own thing in the past, right? So like entrepreneurs. um I'd also say sometimes, like people who are really good at design can also uh really excel in that part of it. um then you'll actually have people who, maybe let's say are more like technical as well, right? So if you have someone who was maybe a software engineer before, or someone who's really interested in software engineering side of things, would actually be one who's maybe like what I'd call like a great like platform PM. So this is someone who really excels in building for software engineers, and whether that is building APIs. And you'd also see companies that, have particular PMs that like excel in this like particular skill set generally. And maybe Stripe would be an example of such a company. Um, and of course, uh, the third would be someone who is maybe, more analytical. Uh, and this would be someone who's really good at analyzing data, spotting trends. Anyone with like a good data background would, anyone, yeah, with a good data scientist, even an analyst would actually make a pretty good like mold into this last bucket. Um, and this is more for like larger companies. We're trying to go from like 1 to 100, right? Which would be more based on like growth, data, experimentation, and that could sort of be your superpower. And of course, ideally you have sort of like a generalist who's good at like sort of all of these things and is a jack of all trades. And I've also seen people, try different types of these roles at, at their stints at a company or at different companies to, of course, learn about the different skill sets, and then also as they do them, like sharpen their skill sets in these areas.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually did a course in product management when I was just learning how to do it, and it made a world of difference, the processes that you can follow. And once you understand it, it becomes a lot easier to get into a rhythm of how you work in sprints. Okay, so that's really interesting. And knowing what you know now, given your career path and your insights, if you had to go back and speak to yourself when you were sort of a freshman or a sophomore, what advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
Oh, I mean, I think just going back, I think there's like, so many things at those points that like you don't know, and maybe you're just trying to do like everything at those points. Which is something that I was guilty of, because I remember even going to, like I think the Goldman info session and the Bain info session um and the Google, and then it's like you can sort of like really be extremely career focused at those points, which I think is good because I think it's helpful to get you clarity, but also just trying to, like more think ahead and in your head at least prioritize some of those, because it can be, exhausting trying to do all of them. And I have also spoken to, you know, folks who are in college right now who are sort of stuck in that, trying to do everything and feeling that they are not being, as successful in doing it all at the same time. And I think it would be a lot for anyone to do. I think in some ways, like try to like prioritize what is important to you in your life, and also then try to just talk to other people in those fields to just, make a better decision on what you want to go and explore and why, and also figure out what would be interesting to learn in college or, during your time in college to help you excel in any field that you decide to go after.
Yeah. So, how are you involved in recruiting at all at Yelp, like in terms of interviewing people or the recruiting process?
Yeah, I'll end up helping on the interviewing side a little bit, but Yelp unfortunately sort of changed lots of their hiring strategy, which is not based on like new grads anymore at all. But I can still, potentially provide some insight into how some of that works.
Yeah, so if you were trying to give advice to someone who was going to an interview for the first time and didn't really know how to prepare or approach it, what would you tell them to do based on your own experience? And also, what are some of the common questions that you would ask in an interview that give you insights into who a person is?
Yeah, and so for PM recruiting, I'd actually just like start out and say that there's like some books that are very popular, similarly to, maybe the software engineering side. And software engineering side has a book which is Cracking the Coding Interview or something, and there's actually like just an equivalent book which is Cracking the PM Interview, which I think is like a good introduction into what's going on. I do actually believe that there's a bunch of resources available online. that are very helpful, which help you actually see like what kind of questions companies have asked in the past and what kind of answers also that other PMs have provided to those questions to like give you a better way to think. And there are like videos and stuff about it too. I think two that come to mind. One is called like Stellar Peers, and others called Exponent. I would, and I think both of them have YouTube pages and stuff as well, so you can like go like just watch content as well instead of reading it. But I think, of course, this is just like trying to put out there that there's a lot of content available. Of course, there's different types of interviews as well. There's, ones that would be called like product sense, which is more about like how do you think about products? Are you empathetic? Others which are more like based on execution, which would be like how do you work with other people? And they also sort of get into like, more of the analytical side, which is like how do you think about setting up experiments? Do you understand A/B testing? How would you run it? Of course, there's also behavioral ones because a massive part of the job is actually on how you work with other people. And so, of course, they want to make sure that partners from other functions are interested in working with you. But the biggest piece of advice that I can actually give is like practice, right? Like no one here is like none of us were like born to suddenly come and do product sense interviews or execution interviews or behavior interviews. Um, and of course, maybe you do have like for behavioral interviews, maybe you like, have some basic understanding of that from going through like recruiting for other fields. But, the others you're going to be, more unknown on. It's more of an unknown world for you. And ideally, the question I then also ask, I mean, think about is like, okay, who do you do interview practice with? Right? Because of course, in college, it's easiest to find, your college friends. But it's very unlikely that your college friends are like recruiters or interviewers for some of these roles as well. If they are, then great. I was like, try to find those folks, because that will actually help you get better insight into what to do, how to improve, and how to just better position and pitch yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. I remember when I did my first interviews, I was really bad. And then I just ended up practicing a bit. And I think practice in these scenarios, like you say, it doesn't really come naturally. So the more you practice, the easier it actually becomes to just be natural and be yourself. Yeah, so just to segue into kind of another topic, in terms of your work-life balance, are you working quite a long hours, or how do you find ways to balance sort of your mental well-being and your work environment?
No, and I mean, I think like into that, work-life balance, I think luckily Yelp is one company that really values, work-life balance for everyone at the company. So of course, there's no like inherent pressure to, work on the weekend or work in the evenings. But of course, sometimes you might have, internal or implicit pressure sometimes to do that because, I mean, one thing as a product manager is that there's always more to-dos that you're going to have on your list than is possible to do with your time, and there's no one necessarily like prioritizing your time except for maybe yourself and in your early years your manager. So it's decisions you have to make sure you're getting the most done and you're prioritizing what's most important. um and so of course I literally like I have a book with me um about all the time because I that's how I'll end up actually prioritizing my to-dos for the day and setting goals on stuff that I want to get done. So of course that's one is just like keeping track of everything that needs to get done and to know what is coming next to make sure I can plan to have it done by. But of course the one other thing is also taking care of yourself outside of it. And one of the things that I had actually started doing when I moved to San Francisco was just trying to be in a very regular like workout schedule as well,
Yeah.
because I think a part of it is making sure you get out, get physical activity, and maybe more so important now in sort of this post-COVID world where we're doing like video calls all the time versus like actually like meeting people face to face because you're not even walking from room to room in an office. So one is of course just getting activity in and having that just sort of like scheduled in your week, Because if you don't prioritize it and it gets moved all the time, you're more likely to like just not do it. Um, Also making sure to take breaks and vacations when you need it. There's a reason you get time off at companies, and I think luckily in tech most companies are really good about letting you actually take that time off to disconnect. So definitely following through on that. And just finding maybe other outlets as well. I think especially in sort of this post-COVID world, I also then started like volunteering outside of work because it was just other ways for me to just like be able to like give back, um and which is just help me keep at peace. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I do as well. I work for a charity on the board called Crew for a Cause, and we basically help raise funds to put students who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it to go through high school. And it's quite fulfilling. It takes up a bit of time, but it's really nice to know that you're working to make money, but then you're taking your skills and you're applying them to some social cause that can have impact. And I really enjoy doing that. And obviously finding time to work out, do yoga and try to get sleep, but it is a fine balance. It's like I don't know if human beings were made to sit for so long every single
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
No, I get that. Yeah, the sitting at the desk for a while is definitely tough, and I mean, of course, there's small things you can do at that time as well, which is just take a break once in a while. You don't have to keep looking at your screen. Make sure to see if you can get a window, refocus your eyes by looking further away. Get a standing desk if possible, but that's like a whole other like a whole other podcast right there, like ergonomics of work from home setup.
Yeah. So what do you think AI is going to do to the world? I mean, it's an interesting question because I think it impacts a lot of college students in terms of thinking about their careers and how do they prepare. And I mean, you're obviously at the forefront of tech companies doing, using the latest tools, etc. What is your current view on AI, and do you use it in your daily life?
Yeah, at least, on the AI front, I think we're still getting to a point where like the tools become, let's say, like every day necessarily. I think we're in a process of getting there. Of course, I think, there are some tools that have become very popular, let's say, ChatGPT. When you think about them, in terms of like what I think is going to happen is I think AI is going to help us like amplify the work that we do instead of necessarily like replace humans or any of that perspective. And in terms of that amplifying, right, like now it's like, okay, cool, if I have to write a doc, I know that like I could actually use chat gpt to like get over my writer's block, or just already have like a structure in place that I can then edit and make better. And so I think it's more a getting comfortable with, using tools such as Chat GPT is definitely helpful, but also making sure that, you're not just using the output of Chat GPT, because I think like, as much as it can be a tool, it can also help you get very lazy and not learn skills. Um, and it's so that I think it's that like that fine balance of like how do you make, man and machine come together to be able to achieve more. Um, and I think that is going to be very interesting journey, and my hope is that like it makes people more productive over time, right? And so it's like, how can you use it to like supercharge your output versus replace your output,
Yeah.
is how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I use ChatGPT, like you said, to build structure, to set up frameworks, and then I have to edit a lot of it myself and make it my own. But I also find, when I'm sending long emails or memos, it can really help me refine it and, take away that tedious time of having to check things and make sure that it's all right. So, yeah, it's an amazing tool. I think it's still in its early days, and it's definitely going to be a lot of development. I mean, the amount of money going into it is insane. So, as a college student, I would say embrace it, use it, figure out how to let it supercharge you, like you say, but also make it your own. Don't just rely on the content that comes out of it. An interesting question that I have for you, and this is probably something you have to think about, is like, what do you think is were the biggest challenges that you faced in your career, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, I think, I mean, some of the biggest things that, do come up is just like some aha moments you have throughout your journey in your career. I remember, like it's so interesting because, when you're in school or even when you're studying, let's say computer science or whatever you're studying, right? Like you go to a teaching assistant or your professor and you ask them the answer to like a homework question and they just know the answer, right? Because like it's sort of contrived. When you sort of get out in the real world, you actually realize that there are many times that no one actually has the real answer or knows the real answer, right? Everyone might have a perspective, um, but doesn't actually know what the answer is, right? So one is sort of like embracing that, hey, no one knows, right? And that could also mean that like, the CEO of your company doesn't know the answer, right? Which is why sort of your task with going and figuring out what it is and making the best recommendation possible. Um, I remember I had that realization maybe like, in my first year of working, full time. Then I think another one generally is that, when you start working, not necessarily is like everything, as defined as it has been in school. In school, you start a semester, you go through that semester, you finish your exams, you have grades, and you're done. It's like a very like defined, 4 or 5 months endeavor, and then you do it again.
Yeah.
But of course, in the real world, like nothing is necessarily that defined there. So it's like, you know, when you decide to, put your energy behind something, you don't know whether, in the beginning, especially whether it's going to take 1 month, it's going to take 1 year. And so, like, how do you like see it through is sort of like another challenge which you get to. And of course, that can also be applied to like different aspects, right? Of course, that's thinking about like a project or a task. But like, even if you just think about your career, right? Which is cool. I have some goals that, of course, I want to keep like moving up and learning and growing. But, when you get into the real world, you realize that, cool, you have a performance review cycle. Maybe it's every 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, but it's not, like, cool, you did this, you get an A and you get a raise and you move on. And a part of that is also, of course, making sure that you are prioritizing your own career and your own learning. And you have to be able to advocate for that, right? Which I think is like also a more like difficult skill to understand because you're not trying to like push to get something that you unfairly deserve, but make sure you're getting opportunities to learn, things you want to get to that next stage, uh, versus just, maybe executing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely can be quite challenging, and I think some of my biggest challenges have been around um, how to stay motivated when I get bored, for example, when something gets monotonous, because I'm an entrepreneur, so I like to build things and I like to do new things. And sometimes, you just have to do the same thing over and over and be consistent in order to get results. And I often talk to my team about how important consistency is, but then I'm the one, coming up with new ideas and not being that consistent. What are you doing sort of for your own learning and development? Or are you reading things or listening to podcasts?
I think there, of course, I mean, I definitely try to like, maybe consuming content. I'll end up preferring maybe videos or podcasts more than just reading, myself. Um, and there, of course, you'd find lots of like, influential product thinkers. Maybe there's different ones in different countries that, do come up there. But I think the one thing that I've actually found, the most helpful necessarily is just trying to find mentors, right? And I think initially that can be like daunting and confusing. And it's like, how do I ask someone to be my mentor? Who should I even ask? What does that ask mean? I think there's lots of like questions and uncertainty around it. Um, at least, what I found best is, like sometimes people will be like, okay, wait, like, if I want, there might be mentors, but like, people might go after like superstars in that field as their mentors initially. But, I think that's like too much of an ask for someone who doesn't know you that well. And it's very hard for you to be able to give back to that person also. And I think the best mentors then are people who are maybe just like, a couple years ahead of you. Maybe like, even at that, like 2 years ahead of you, or like, if there's like levels, if there's like two levels above you, would sort of be like, a good level of mentors to actually get, because hey, they've already been through what you may be going through right now, and they already have, they've already been through it on the other side and been successful, and but they're not that far away from your experience that they've forgotten about it, or that they're like maybe too busy, or they're too important to be able to give you that time. And I think so I think finding mentors is one thing that is, I think, the most beneficial. And I've been very lucky to also just like run into really cool people who have been very helpful over time. And of course, maybe I've never asked them specifically like, hey, be my mentor. Like that was never the conversation.
Build a relationship. Yeah.
Exactly, just building a relationship and following through, and also just a part of that is also just being like a good human being and following up with them about things, and just staying in touch, and trying to also help them out wherever possible.
Yeah, you kind of think of it as like a system where you need to every week kind of like see who's in your field of relationships and maintain them and send messages. And you know it's always good to keep building that level of trust and deepening the relationships, especially when you're young and in college. You don't realize how important your network is, and that it's actually up to you to develop it as you with every person that you interact with. It's kind of the balls in
No,
your.
absolutely. And I think in college, maybe, I think the good thing is that you sort of have so many people who, might have like similar ambitions and similar like careers that they want to go through, which is why, like, maybe it's easier to build relationships then, but which is why you don't necessarily think about like the maintaining of relationships, which is maybe, I think, what becomes more important to, the longer you have been, out there. Um,
Well, Ariane, I think this is a good amount of time for our episode. I've kind of noticed that the students like episodes that are like around 40 minutes. So I've really enjoyed hearing your story and kind of following your journey to where you are today. But my last question is, where do you see yourself in kind of the next 10 years, and what is the vision for your future?
Oh, that is a question that I contend with every day. So I'll give you my latest thinking there. Maybe it'll change very soon. But of course, about that is like I'm not sure what that's necessarily going to be. But in thinking about like what could be next, or what's sort of coming, 10 years down the line, I've always sort of initially had in mind that I want to start my own thing. Which was, I thought being a product manager would be great learning for that, because you get to interact with people throughout different skills, influence them without authority. The more I sort of been out there, of course, I have been trying to think of, what is that idea that would actually really inspire me to take on, the entire endeavor of becoming an entrepreneur. Uh, but with that, after being, out there working now for about nearly 6 years now, I've even had the chance of, building my own thing at, maybe an established company. And um, and that has also been something that has been very rewarding, and you can sort of see that output, because I did get to build a product now that's driving, can't say the exact number, but like in like the double digit $1 million every year in terms of revenue. And that has definitely been something that is rewarding. We built that from scratch. And so with that, my point of view has evolved more, where like I'm also completely happy finding my own space and niche at a bigger company, getting to do work on problems that I find interesting, and trying to see if I can drive solutions end to end. So I don't know which way it'll go, whether it is my own company or my niche in a big company. I'm not sure where it'll end up, but if I'm there in that 5 to 10 years, I would be happy.
Awesome. I love that. I like the idea of innovating within a company as well. It's way less stressful than starting a company on your
Yeah.
own. Yeah. So, yeah, that's super exciting. Do you have any questions for me before we close off?
No, no questions for you. I'm happy we could connect.
Yeah, it was great to connect, and let's stay in touch and keep chatting. Maybe we can develop a little course for the students about product management or something cool like that, like a mini workshop.
Yeah, no, 100% happy to help there.
Okay, great. Well, that's all from today's show. another interesting lesson about the journey into product management and the different kinds of skills you need to go into that career. I'm sure you can get in touch with Aryan if he's open to it. And thanks for your time today. Bye. And that's a wrap. What an amazing episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please don't forget to go onto the Spotify link, like and subscribe to the podcast, maybe leave a review. And if you want to see the video, you can go to the YouTube channel and watch it over there. But the best part of all is the newsletter. So every week we send out a newsletter, the Career Coach newsletter. This will give you access to additional information, show notes, tutorials, book reviews. So I highly recommend that you sign up and subscribe to the newsletter. And as always, feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. And see you soon on the next episode.